Thank you, Deb, for having us. Hi, everybody. I'm Eddie Martucci. I'm the pharmacy manager at the Big Y Walpole Pharmacy. Thank you again to the Walpole Council of Aging for inviting me here to talk. Thanks, Deb. There are some things on the table afterwards if you want, some of the services that we offer, but also one of the important things that I want to point out is the calendar that's done by our Living Well, Eating Smart dietitians. They have virtual events you can log on the computer. I know it's the end of July, and this is July, but I'll bring up a bunch for August when we get our new August ones in. Good morning, Miss Jean. Welcome. Yeah, that's why I said something. I don't let you sneak in. So I just, again, thank you for having us. We're going to talk about seasonal allergies and a little bit about some other things that kind of are coordinated with that. Walpole, Big Y, all of Big Y is very community forward. They like to go out and do community outreach programs like this, and they're very good for us to, and good to us so that we can come out and do that. They give me the time to be able to do that. A little background about me. I used to own an independent pharmacy in Connecticut for a dozen years. I've been with Big Y for 12 years. My expertise is in a lot of different things. I used to be a certified diabetic educator, certified asthma therapist. I've done fittings for mastectomies, ostomies, those kind of things, all kinds of durable medical equipment. But I also like to use my brain a lot, so that's why we like to come out and do this stuff here. So the title of this talk is, Why Do I Sneeze in the Spring? Here we go. So the definition of a sneeze is also called a sternutation, and it's just a semi-autonomic, and that means our brain does it automatically, convulsive expulsion of air from the lungs through the nose and mouth. It's usually caused by a foreign particle irritation within our nasal mucosa. So all that means is we get something in our nose or our sinuses, we don't like it, we're going to get rid of it, we sneeze. Oops, wrong way. The reasons that we can sneeze are that we have allergens that cause us to sneeze. So allergens can be dust or pollen, ragweed, animal dander if we're allergic to cats or mice, or if we have mice, I don't know, or gerbils. We had all kinds of different animals when we had kids. Viruses, which could be a regular cold virus, a flu, COVID, of course, or a rhinovirus. And then irritations like pollution, smog, or fumes from gasoline or diesel. A sneeze can travel 100 miles an hour, isn't that amazing? And release 20,000 droplets of water. Or whatever you have as the allergen that's in there can come out. And then a cough can travel about 50 miles an hour and 3,000 droplets. The difference between the sneeze and cough is not only just the rates of volume of air that goes out and how many water droplets are expelled, but also a cough is normally only our mouth that it will affect. It doesn't come through our nose. So how does our body make us sneeze? And now we get into our little bit of a science. There's a sneeze-evoking region in brain stems in humans. It's also in cats, too, just so you know, that causes us to sneeze. Nasal sensory neurons release what is called neuromedin B, or abbreviated NMB, that initiates a sneeze. And the sneeze is a vital respiratory reflex. Because if we didn't sneeze, we would build up all kinds of things within our nasal mucosa that would travel into our esophagus and our lungs, and maybe we wouldn't be able to breathe so well. What happens when we have an allergen is something that causes our body to recognize as not self, and we build an antibody to it. So when an antibody sees an allergen that's out there and says, hey, you're not me, I'm going to attack you. When it binds to them and it goes to the histamine, the mast cells carry histamine. The cell breaks open because this complex binds to its cellular circumference, and histamine is released. So histamine is released in the area of the body where that allergen or that irritation occurs. And it causes fluids to flow into that area, and it causes swelling, rhinorrhea, which is our nose running, and then it causes us to sneeze. The symptoms that we normally see with regular seasonal allergies are sneezing, a runny nose, itchy eyes, the non-productive cough, that kind of a cough. That's normally caused by postnasal drip on the back of our throats. That's from an allergy. That's an allergen antibody type of a reaction. Might not let us sleep real well, and we'd generally be kind of miserable because we don't feel good and things aren't working well. If we're trying to fight off anything, whether it's a virus, a cold, a bacterial infection, our body's one of its mechanisms is to increase the body temperature so we don't feel comfortable. There are many different ways that we can treat our allergy symptoms, and these are some different things on there. Being married to a good Irish woman, I put the picture of Jameson so that you can get some sleep. You have a little bit of Jameson. I'll bird walk for a second. When I bought a house in Farmington, Connecticut, it had a man cave downstairs, really nice, had a bar and everything. And I told one of my customers, Mr. McCoy, that I had dropped a bottle of Jameson on the tile floor and it broke. And he said, "Did you get down and lick it up?" And I said, "No, Mr. McCoy, I didn't do it." He said, "You're not a true Irishman then, are you?" So anyway, there's different things. Vitamin C, Zicam. Zicam is a homeopathic, and we'll talk a little bit about homeopathy. Homeopathic treatment that helps with allergies. And then you can treat your symptoms with an antihistamine, and most of the things in the bottom left are antihistamine. Hot tea, honey and lemon for your sore throat. And those are different remedies that we have. The way that we treat things, we can treat the symptoms. So if we have a sneeze, we can treat the sneeze. If we have a headache due to allergies, we can treat that. If we have a sinus headache, maybe we'll take some pseudoephedrine or one of the phenylephrines if we don't want to take pseudoephedrine because it might keep us up at night. So we can take that to treat that. Or if we have itchy eyes or runny nose, we can treat them in those ways. So symptomatic treatment using antihistamines, cough suppressants, eye drops, things like that. Or we can remove the allergen, which would be things like vaccines, getting allergy shots, and wearing face masks. Because a lot of the allergens are airborne. So if we use the face masks to prevent that from getting into our respiratory system, it'll work that way. So what an antihistamine does, and I'll give you a list of those in a sec, the antihistamine blocks the receptor that the histamine needs to plug into to cause that swelling, that water that comes in, causes the reaction that our body says we want to protect this area because something there doesn't belong. There are two different designations for histamine receptors, H1 and H2. H1 are mostly in our periphery, nose, mouth, and our eyes and our skin, a little bit in our brain, and then the other one is in our GI tract. And the ones that the aisle where you have all your allergy medicines when you come in to see Eddie, and he says it's right there in aisle 1, is the ones that attack or work on the H1 receptors. So these are the ones that are available over the counter that you can purchase for your antihistamines. Claritin, which is loratadine, Zyrtec, cetirizine, Allegra, fexofenadine. Oh, I'm going to make you pronounce all these too at the end. No, we won't. Zizal, which used to be prescription. It's the latest one that went over from prescription to over the counter. Benadryl, which everybody knows, that's the biggest one. That was the very first one available. And then Unisom, which is doxylamine. Doxylamine is the antihistamine that they use in NyQuil because it makes you very tired. So along with having 25% alcohol in NyQuil, you also have the doxylamine to help you go to sleep. And the difference in our antihistamines is how strong are they versus how do they make us go to bed? And the relation to that is the stronger the antihistaminic activity, the more sleepy it makes you. Oh, look at that. I said that already. The stronger the antihistamine, the more sleepy and more drowsiness that it does cause. So if we go back to our list, this is listed in weakest to strongest antihistamine, but also in least drowsy to most drowsy. And we'll have a chart about that maybe next. No, in a second we will. There is a drug that is not an antihistamine that they do use for asthma mostly, but they can also use it for allergies or for a short term for colds. It's called Singulair or Montelukast. And what that does is it stabilizes the mast cells. As we talked about previously, the mast cells are those guys that release the histamine. So if you stabilize that circumference, when that antibody-antigen complex binds to that cell, it won't break open and the histamine won't be released. So that's what they do. And it is mostly used in asthma, but based on how it works and the science of it, it makes sense that you probably could use it for a severe cold if you had it for 10 or 14 days. There's never been any study for that, so it's not listed in its list of what it's supposed to do that the manufacturer puts out, but it does make sense that it would do that. So this is the chart that I was alluding to earlier, how long they would last. So you see that the first 4 are 24-hour antihistamines. Their power rating, how much sleepiness it makes you have. You don't really get any drowsiness at all with Claritin. Mostly none with Zyrtec, and a little bit with Allegra, a little bit with Zizal. Benadryl, yeah, you'll go to sleep. Most of the Z, if you've seen those, the Z pack, the Z-Pal that they have on the shelves in the sleeping area, the area for hypnotics to go to sleep, that's all Benadryl. And then if you do take Unisom, which is actually meant specifically for sleep, good night. That one makes you very drowsy. And then you'd also, because it lasts quite a while, because you're taking it at the end of the day, to go to bed, it'll make you sleep, and you'll feel groggy in the morning. It'll have what they call as a drug hangover, and it just means that you still feel a little sluggish and drowsy from the drowsiness effect. So the H2 blocker, H2 receptors, histamine receptors, the ones in our stomach, and those are normally used for GI irritation. So if we have maybe some GERD, maybe some acid reflux, acid esophagitis, so it blocks the normal amount of stomach acid released due to the food we eat. For instance, if, and I'm just using numbers here as an example, if we ate a tuna grinder and a small bag of chips for lunch, maybe that would release 20 units of acid to break that down in our bodies. If we took one of these drugs, we might release only 16 or 18 units. That's how that would work, because you're blocking some of the receptors that are in the GI tract. That's opposed to the PPIs, or proton pump inhibitors that people take, omeprazole, or the Protonix, or the Prevacid. Those ones stop the acid pump from making acid, so it's more effective at causing less acid to be released into our stomach. And you can see the ones that are available. Pepcid and Zantac is back on the market, but it's actually the same chemical entity as the Pepcid is. And Tagamet. Tagamet was one of the first ones, but it has a few more interactions through the cytochrome P450 system. So Tagamet really isn't the one that a lot of people use Pepcid is, and now you can do Zantac because it really is Pepcid as well. The ranitidine was taken off the market due to levels of NDMA, which can increase with time and temperature within a human's body, and it has been linked to bladder, colon, and prostate cancer. So anything that causes cancer, they release. Now, you have to take that with a grain of salt, because a lot of times when they do those studies, they use 100 times the human dose on a mouse, and a mouse, as we know, is a little smaller than us, because if I saw a mouse that was my size, I would turn and run away. So when should we take our allergy medications? Well, you can take it when you want to treat a certain annoying symptom like a runny nose, itchy eyes, or sneezing. So you can take that periodically, and a lot of them you can take 2 or 3 times a day if you need to, or some of them are once a day, like the Zyrtec and the Claritin, or you can take it a half an hour before going into an area where you may have possible allergens. So if you're going to go hiking, you're probably going to come in contact with some of these fellows that will cause you to have an allergy if you have an allergy to ragweed. So if you took your Zizal or Allegra half an hour before you went, you'd be good, as protected as you can be. Or if you wore a mask, if you wore one of the HEPA filter masks, that would prevent you from breathing in any foreign substance other than air, so you wouldn't get the allergen reaction within your nasal mucosa. This is an allergic reaction too, and I put our good friend poison ivy up here because it's an acquired allergy. Most people, the first time they touch poison ivy and see poison ivy, they don't react to it because our body really doesn't know what it is. Maybe the second time it doesn't happen a lot, but most people, the 4th or 5th time that you touch it in your lifetime, you get a really good reaction to it. And it's caused with the urushiol oils It's an oily substance that's on the leaves, it's on the stems, it's on the stalks, it's on the roots of poison ivy. So it can come from anywhere. And those oils can hang around for a while. So if you do your fall cleanup and you have a jacket on because you're in the fall, you have a jacket on and you're removing poison ivy plants and shrubs and ivy from your yard, and the oil's still on there, you put your jacket away without washing it, and in the spring, if you touch the jacket, you can get poison ivy. So whenever you get poison ivy, there are certain things that we can do for it. You want to wash your clothes in hot soapy water. You want to use something like Tecnu or Ivy Block. You can use Ivy Block before you go out in the yard, and that is a lotion that you put on the skin that you may have contact with the leaves, and the oil will bind to that and not bind to your skin and get absorbed in. Now, poison ivy looks like it spreads. It really doesn't, but it looks like it spreads, and that's because if you brush up against a leaf while you're walking, you maybe touch a little bit here, and then it has more contact in the middle, and then as you walk away, you get a little bit on the end. So it's going to show up here first, and then a day later, it'll show up where it didn't touch as much. So it looks like it's spreading, but it really isn't. You've touched it that whole time, all that first contact. Poison ivy is not fun. Most of the guys that I golf with will birdwalk a second again. Will tell me not to look for balls because there's poison ivy in there, and I tell them I have drugs that will treat that. So, so what kind of drug interactions can we have with antihistamines? And there are a couple that we want to talk about. These are some of the drugs. Cymbalta, which is duloxetine. Lexapro with escitalopram, those are used for anxiety, or they're antidepressants, and it can increase the levels of the antihistamine with the Cymbalta, so you will get that drowsiness effect, because any antihistamine will make you drowsy if you take enough of it. Also, the issue of taking higher than recommended doses of antihistamine, not only are you going to be drowsy, but you'll get really dry mouth, dry eyes, because that's also what antihistamines do. It slows down that watering process that we talked about when we have the initial contact with an allergen. The metoprolol, it might lower your blood pressure more than you need to, so that's not a good thing. Lyrica, which is used for our nerve pain mostly, it can make us dizzy and confused. Xanax, again, an anxiolytic used for anxiety, makes us dizzy. You get abnormal thinking and behaviors if you take it with opiates and sedatives and other anxiolytics. And then alcohol, of course, increases dizziness and sedation. So it's never a good idea to take our Claritin with a 6-ounce glass of vodka. That's not really helpful. We always try to remember our new mouth covering technique. We sneeze into our elbow. That helps to prevent the spread of anything that we're spitting out, because if we're allergic to it, somebody else might be allergic to it as well. So those 20,000 droplets that come out with a sneeze, we want to make sure that I don't give it to you, because although sharing is caring, it isn't in this case. We don't really want to do that. So I have time for questions. What kind of questions do we have? Anybody? That's okay. We don't have to have questions today. We will, thank you very much. Yes, we have a question. Yes, ma'am. Only if you want to treat your symptoms, Dora. It will make you sleepy. That's absolutely true. The more medications that you take that make you drowsy, that have the propensity to make you drowsy, 1 may not do it, 2 may not do it, but if you add a third that could, it would. So in your case, if you wanted to do that and you were taking a couple of medications that made you drowsy, Claritin would probably be your best bet. The problem with antihistamines, I'm glad you said that, because the problem with antihistamines, especially for seasonal allergies, is that after a couple of seasons, the effect may not help you. So if I took Claritin for season 1 and it worked, and season 2 and it worked, and season 3 it worked okay, not so great, season 4 it may not work. So I might have to go to a Zyrtec or an Allegra for that season, and then I could go back to Claritin. Our bodies get used to things, so it kind of compensates in the wrong way. It compensates in the good way, too, when we take medications. The other thing is depending on what medications you're taking that are eliminated the same way from the body. So it would be like I-93. We all love I-93, right? So 95 is going along really nice. We get to 93 and it bottles up because there's so many cars coming on. And so if same thing. If all of our drugs that we take are eliminated through the same liver enzyme system, like let's say oxidation, then if we add another drug that's eliminated that same way, it's going to slow down the elimination of the other drugs, so you may have higher levels of that causing your adverse events. So that's a great question. Thank you, Dora, for that. Yes, ma'am. Well, any of the antihistamines should take care of that. That's what it dries it up. So will it do, if it's happening a lot and you're still continuing to see the allergen that causes it, you may need to take a more potent one. So you may need to go to a Zizal or even a Benadryl at night specifically if it's bothering you. But normally it's the antihistamines that will do it. So Claritin, Zyrtec, Zizal, Allegra, those guys. Decongestant helps open things up. So the best decongestant is pseudoephedrine. That's the one you have to use your license to buy behind the pharmacy counter. That's the best one. And you can get a combination product. I frankly don't normally like to take a combination product unless you really need both those symptoms taken care of. Why add a medication to our bodies that we don't need? But the Sudafed is the best. And I always recommend using just the 30 milligram, which is the every 4 to 6 hour pseudoephedrine, because that way, if you need to take it again, you can. If you don't need to, then you don't need to do that. That being said, when you take those, or if you took a long-acting one, you don't want to take it too late in the day. I wouldn't take the 4 to 6 hour one after 7 o'clock at night because it might keep you awake. Now, there is a pseudoephedrine cousin that you can get in aisle 1 when you come see Eddie at Walpole Big Y, aisle 1 called phenylephrine. And it's not as effective as a decongestant, but maybe that's what you want to do. And if you have high blood pressure, there's a talk about that. The pseudoephedrine can raise our blood pressure because it squeezes things. So when we squeeze our vessels, all of our vessels, we raise our blood pressure. If your blood pressure is controlled at a normal level, you can probably take a pseudoephedrine once a day for 2 or 3 days, but you shouldn't take it longer than that. Singulair is used for asthma mostly, but asthma can be an allergen type of a reaction. So you may want to talk to your, if you have a pulmonologist, or you may want to talk to your regular GP, your doctor, and see if that would be something that would work for you. Maybe it would stop it, but Singulair is one that you have to take all the time. Taking it just a few days, as I said, there was never really any study for that. And in asthma, it only works if you take it all the time. So don't be like my mother, who, when she has problems breathing, she'll use her Advair and feel good and then say, oh, I'm cured, and stop using it, and then have troubles breathing again 2 or 3 weeks later. So that's one of the ones that you have to take all the time. It's not very expensive. So if that is a drug that is your doctor would think would help you, then you certainly can try it. But you do have to take it for at least a month to see if that does help. Yes, ma'am. Well, it depends on what symptoms you have. Sure. If you have a symptom of itchy eyes and runny nose and you think it's just a cold going on, you could do that. And you could get one of the multi-symptom medications that would, if you have a fever or headache, one that adds Tylenol, acetaminophen into it. Or if you have a little bit of a cough and it's irritating at night, the dry hacking cough, normally an antihistamine will stop, but sometimes at night it doesn't. So you could take a cough suppressant like the dextromethorphan too. So yes, you certainly could. Yes, ma'am. Is it because things are dry, or is it? Yeah. Do you use a nasal saline spray at night? No. That might be an option because it'll help keep the nasal mucosa moist, so that the way it doesn't dry out to cause you to have that dryness in your throat and in your mouth and in the back of your throat. So you would use it, and whenever we use any nasal sprays, and this is another learning point, this is where we add our physics, when we take physics in college, to our pharmacy, use opposite hand. Because if you split our head down the middle, our cavities, our nasal sinus cavities are on the sides. So if we use our right hand for our right nostril, you see the attitude that my spray is. It just goes up and down the back of the throat. It works a little bit. But if I use it for my left nostril, it sprays into those sinus cavities. So with all of them, with all of them, with all of them. Yeah, use your opposite hand. So left hand for right nostril, right hand for left nostril. Yeah, they should tell you that. I always put up the new normal just to make sure, especially with this new variant. Now there's a B variant, another B variant. One of the B variants was the very first one that came out in the United Kingdom, B109, I believe. And now a C variant was bad, and Omicron we know was bad last year, at the end of last year. So keep our physical distancing. I don't like to say social distance because we're social animals, and we should be social animals. Our physical distance, get your vaccines, sanitize, wear a mask if you're going into people you don't know or you haven't been with for a long time. And with that, we can leave you with a nice picture of what we have at the end of our summers and springs, at the end of the day when we're looking out on Lake Maspag. And hopefully the Loch Ness Monster doesn't come up. And then thank you again to Walpole and to Big Y. And thank you for having me. Have a great day.